Joining me now is Matt Bennett, co-founder of Third Way and someone who has worked very closely with these Newtown families. First of all, thank you so much for being here. We very much appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start out asking you about what your experience has been like working with these families for the past year. And if you could tell me, what was that very first meeting like when you met with them right after the shooting?
It was extraordinary. It's been an amazing privilege to get to work with these people. They are incredibly brave and dedicated people, and I'm very thankful to have been able to work with them. The very first time I met them was early February of this year, which was about 5 weeks after the shootings. And about a dozen of them had come to Washington. I don't frankly know how they could even function, but they had come to Washington. They were doing meetings with Vice President Biden and with some senators. And I had met already with some representatives of their group, Sandy Hook Promise, to talk them through the basics of gun policy and gun politics. And of course, these are people, they were just ordinary people. They had no idea about gun law. So they asked me to come and talk to this group. And then after meeting with them here in Washington, I went up to Newtown and met with a broader group of families.
And tell me, I want to get to Washington and how you helped them navigate through that. But first, just the transformation that you saw. You saw these ordinary people go from, just a couple who used to live in Newtown, Connecticut, to advocates essentially and gun control lobbyists. What was it like watching that change?
Right. I mean, they didn't get all the way to lobbyists, just to be clear, but they were very, very persuasive advocates and still are. What happened was they made a determination that they wanted to honor the lives of their children or their family members in a way that would leave an impact on the country, because they recognized that the Newtown massacre had scarred the country. This was such a transformational experience. And they wanted to do something similar to what the 9/11 families did, which was to really make a mark. And the way to do that, of course, was to come here and to try to change the law in Congress. When they came down here, it seemed pretty self-evident to them, well, of course something's going to happen. Everyone is telling us that it will. Everyone is telling us that this time it's different, so we're going to be able to make some things happen. They quickly understood that the politics of guns in Washington is incredibly difficult and complicated, and they became very sophisticated about how to navigate.
Yeah, and I mean, as you were talking about, it must have been a huge just learning curve for these families. And what was it like explaining to them how to navigate Washington and how things work here, and essentially, managing their expectations in terms of what they were hoping to accomplish?
Well, first of all, these people are very smart. They're well educated, and they pick up things very, very quickly. So it wasn't hard to kind of give them the basics of Washington 101. They were shocked when I told them that it was unlikely, for example, that Congress was going to extend the assault weapons ban and the ban on high-capacity magazines, because after all, those were the things involved in the Newtown shooting and the obvious things for them to work on. And when I did that, I kind of learned a lesson. This was in the very first meeting. One of the moms said to me, "Do not tell us that this is impossible, because we are not ready to hear that. Tell us it'll take a while. That's okay. Now tell us what we can do, because we have to do something."
Right.
And so this was an extraordinary act of courage and kind of generosity of spirit, because they were willing to set aside the things that were directly involved in the shootings and work on other things.
And earlier this year, we even saw the gun bill that did make it on the Hill fail. What was that like for the families?
Well, by that time it was April, and they had been working on this very intensively, both in Connecticut, where they did pass a law, and down here. They'd been engaged, many of them day to day. They'd come down several times to talk to senators in person. And just before the bill was brought to the floor, they came down on Air Force One with the president after he had spoken up in Connecticut. So they were very intensely focused on trying to get the bill passed. They understood that it was going to be an uphill battle. We were all reasonably hopeful that we could at least get close, which we did. We didn't get across the finish line, and they were disappointed, but unbowed. They recognized that gun policy takes a long time, and that this could take many more years.
Yeah, and it's been a long road so far. It's been a year. And do you think that they would be happy if we could, kind of take a piecemeal approach to it and maybe get a little something done here and there in terms of getting legislation passed in Washington?
Well, it really depends on how it's chopped up into the piecemeal. I think that there are certain things that could move independently of each other that would make sense, and certain things that wouldn't. And Now, as you point out, they become so sophisticated about this, they're saying, well, but we have these conversations where they are real analysts about gun policy, gun law, and particularly gun politics. They understand that certain senators who voted against the Manchin-Toomey bill in April really understood that they were doing the wrong thing, were doing it for political reasons, might have gotten the politics of that wrong too. So they are really working to keep pressure on the people who might be willing to change their votes and ultimately get that bill across the finish line.
A lot of people, it seemed as if Newtown was this turning point and there was this momentum, moving closer and closer towards getting a bill passed. Do you think maybe this anniversary will gin up the momentum again, or have we lost momentum in this moment?
Well, in Washington, we've lost momentum on everything. I mean, they're barely able to keep the lights on in Congress, so it does seem a stretch that we'll be able to get a big gun bill done anytime very soon. But keep in mind that gun bills take a long time. The Brady bill, the Brady Act, which along with the assault weapons ban was the last big legislation passed, was 20 years ago. That was begun in 1981 after John Hinckley assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan injured Jim Brady, his press secretary. And so it was 12 years between that assassination attempt and the passage of the Brady Act in 1993. We're confident this isn't going to take 12 years to shore up some loopholes in the Brady Act, but it could take a while.
Yeah. And then getting back to the families for a moment, they've been asking for privacy in terms of the media coming in for this anniversary in particular. Later this week, we heard from Joanne Bacon, the mother of Charlotte Bacon, at a press conference a little earlier. Let's take a listen.
We ask that you understand that each of us, each family, is unique in our own experiences following this tragedy. And we each have our own voice and perspective. By creating this website, we hope to offer an opportunity to communicate with our families and honor the ones that we love, while at the same time respecting each family's individual journey and unique experiences.
So in terms of the media coming in, even people coming in to observe this anniversary, do you think their requests will be honored?
I hope so. I mean, remember, when they talk to the media, they're being asked to relive the darkest moment of their life, the darkest moment that an adult can have in life. And they have to do it again and again and again. This is incredibly hard. And they have been very brave and very willing to do it for a purpose, but they don't want to be exploited, and they shouldn't be.
And lastly, I want to ask you, what's next? What's next for these families? What do you think is next for what happens here in Washington?
Well, as we heard in the clip, they put together this website which kind of lays out many of their different visions for what can be done to honor the loss of their family members. Some of them focus on mental health, some of them focus on school safety. There are some other things as well. But many of them are still focused, and Sandy Hook Promise is still focused on passing gun legislation, and they are in the arena every day. We talk to them frequently, and they're going to keep pushing.
All right. Well, Matt Bennett, co-founder of Third Way, we really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you. It's been my honor.